I mean, think about it for a second. Your packages arrive in, like, 2 hours.
Right.
Artificial intelligence is mapping the human genome overnight. The global stock market just hums along, processing billions of transactions in a millisecond.
It's incredible, honestly.
It is. On paper, by every macroeconomic metric we have, the world is operating at peak performance. So why are you and, almost everyone, too exhausted to even figure out what to make for dinner?
Yeah, that is, it's really the defining paradox of our time.
Totally.
We're surrounded by the most efficient systems ever built, yet the people living inside those systems are basically running on fumes.
Yeah, and we tend to look at this exhaustion and frame it as, like, a personal failure. Like, you just need better time management or a new productivity app.
Exactly. It's like it's your fault you can't keep up.
Right. But the stack of research we're looking at for today's deep dive argues something entirely different. We're going to unpack a set of analytical theses that look at the hidden structural shifts inside modern society.
And just to be clear, our mission here isn't to peddle some sensationalist doomsday narrative.
Oh, no, definitely not. We're not here to tell you society is collapsing. We're taking a calm, reflective look at one central question. Why does society continue moving without truly recovering?
To get to the bottom of that, we actually have to discard the vocabulary we usually rely on.
What do you mean?
Well, we constantly hear words like crisis or collapse thrown around on the news, right?
Okay.
But the researchers argue that those terms kind of misdiagnose the condition.
Okay, so if it's not a crisis, what is it?
We are not in a crisis. Society has simply normalized a state of continuous operation.
Huh.
We are a high-load system that is functioning incredibly well, but we are actively, structurally, losing our capacity to recover.
Wow. And that loss of recovery capacity, that's a massive historical shift, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because for thousands of years, human civilization operated on a highly predictable rhythm. I mean, you exert energy, you deplete your resources, and then you stop. You rest.
You have.
Right. The abnormality or the shock passes, the system adjusts, and eventually stability returns. You get a breather before the next challenge. But today, that breather is just gone.
Yeah, the breather is gone because the system never stops accelerating. And to really grasp this, we need to look at how the researchers categorize systemic states.
Okay, lay it on me.
Historically, if a society was under stress, it might enter what they call phase S3.
Phase S3. Got it.
Think of S3 as pure wear and tear. It's like a steel bridge slowly rusting over decades. You can see the degradation, and you know it needs maintenance.
Right, and if you don't maintain that rusting bridge, you eventually hit phase S4, which is total phase transition or, systemic collapse.
Exactly. The bridge literally snaps, traffic stops, and you're forced to clear the rubble and build an entirely new structure.
But the analysis points out that we are currently in neither of those phases, right?
Correct. We are not slowly rusting away in S3,
Yeah.
and we are certainly not collapsing in S4.
So where are we?
We are trapped in this very specific modern middle ground. They call it phase S3.5, or chronic depolarization.
Chronic depolarization. Let me try to break down how the research explains the mechanics of this, because it's fascinating.
Go for it.
In biology, when a cell depolarizes, it fires off its signal. But then it has to repolarize. It has to rest and reset before it can fire again.
Right, that's the natural cycle.
Exactly. So if the system is chronically depolarized, it means it's constantly firing without ever being allowed to reset. It develops this hypersensitivity to microstimuli.
And the translation of that into our daily lives is profound. Because your brain and your institutions are constantly bombarded, they treat every tiny fluctuation, an email, a news alert, a shift in the market, as an immediate existential threat.
Oh, wow. So you're just constantly in fight or flight.
Basically, yeah. Your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for deep thought and long-term planning, it effectively shuts down. You literally only have the bandwidth to put out the fire directly in front of you.
You completely lose your resynchronization capacity. You are just reacting.
Exactly.
It makes me think about that visceral feeling of being stuck at an airport after a delayed flight, right? And your smartphone is at like 1% battery.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
It really is. It doesn't actually shut off. The screen dims, the apps become incredibly sluggish, and basic functions start glitching.
Right, you can barely open your boarding pass.
Exactly. And because you are constantly moving through the terminal, scanning passes, checking updates, you never actually get the chance to sit down and plug it into a wall. It just stays alive, dim, and struggling indefinitely.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the danger of that 1% state isn't a sudden crash, A crash would at least force a hard reset.
Right.
The real danger, and this is the defining characteristic of phase S3.5, is permanence. Society becomes fixed in this unbreakable high-load state.
We just adapt to the 1% battery life.
Yes, we accept the sluggishness, the dim screen, the baseline exhaustion as the new normal.
Okay, wait, let me push back on this premise for a
Right.
second. Because the entire pitch for the modern technological era, automation, AI, hyper-efficient global logistics, was that it would act as a release valve for our exhaustion.
That was the promise, yeah.
Technology was supposed to buy us time. The machine does the heavy lifting, so the human gets a 4-day work week. Why did ultimate systemic efficiency do the exact opposite and drain our batteries even faster?
The broken promise of technology comes down to a structural dynamic. The source is called the velocity mismatch.
Velocity mismatch.
Right. The world is no longer one unified system. It's actually split into two deeply incompatible layers. On top, you have the fast OS, the fast operational system.
And that's like the digital stuff.
Exactly. This is the realm of AI, global capital, algorithmic trading, and instant information flow. It operates at the speed of light.
And beneath that, bearing all the weight, is what the researchers call the slow membrane.
Yes.
That's biology. That's human cognition, physical bodies, raising children, looking after the elderly, and, maintaining local community infrastructure.
And the friction between these two layers is the core issue. The fast OS doesn't just execute tasks. It dictates the pace of reality.
Mm.
And the logic of the fast OS is that it is optimized by never stopping. In a global algorithmic market, any delay, any pause for breath, is calculated as a systemic cost. It's basically a bug to be eradicated.
But the slow membrane is the exact opposite. Human life and biological systems are maintained specifically by recovering. We require sleep.
We absolutely
We
do.
require unstructured downtime. We require redundancy just to emotionally and physically survive. So when you layer a system that punishes resting on top of a biological organism that requires resting.
You generate a massive amount of friction.
Right.
The sources refer to that friction as shear. And you see the shear everywhere.
Just like where? Give me an example.
Consider an algorithmic supply chain. The software routes a delivery truck with mathematical perfection, right?
Yeah.
It accounts for traffic and weather in real time. It expects continuous, optimized movement. But the delivery driver is a slow membrane organism. They need a bathroom break. They get fatigued. The algorithm flags that biological necessity as an inefficiency. The human absorbs the friction.
Man, the pace of the fast OS forces humans out of a recovery mindset entirely. The analysis uses a phrase that really stuck with me. It says we are forced to maintain connection while exhausting yourself.
That's a great way to put it.
And that is the reality of the modern workday. You receive a Slack message at 9 p.m. on a Friday. The server routed it instantly. The sender expects a rapid reply because the system technically allows for one.
Right. The technology makes it possible, so it becomes expected.
Exactly. You either respond and deplete your energy, or you disconnect and face the anxiety of falling behind. Either way, your recovery is completely compromised.
The fast OS treats human rest as latency. And because our livelihoods, our social lives, and our survival are tethered to this machine, we have to bend to its logic.
Wow.
We force ourselves to be compatible with a system that views our basic biological needs as flaws.
Okay, but if the shear is this intense, it begs a massive question. When pressure builds up in historical systems, you usually get a rupture, right?
Sure, historically speaking.
A massive strike, a widespread rebellion, or a total rejection of the new paradigm. If everyone is this exhausted, why hasn't the whole thing just blown up? Why does society still look so stable?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
The researchers examined this absence of systemic rupture and identify a mechanism they call silence detection.
Silence detection.
Yeah. In previous eras, labor or societal pressure would pool in centralized locations, a factory floor, a town square, making it easy to ignite a collective response.
Like a literal spark.
Exactly. But the architecture of the fast OS is incredibly decentralized. It atomizes the pressure. The weight of the system is distributed directly onto the shoulders of the individual.
Oh, I see. So the pressure doesn't pool, it just seeps into your living room.
Precisely.
The sources give some really visceral examples of how this silent exhaustion manifests. It's the heavy, paralyzing dread of opening an overflowing inbox on a Monday morning.
We've all been there.
Or it's the small business owner burning the midnight oil, constantly tweaking their marketing strategy just to survive some opaque algorithm change on a social media platform.
Right.
It's the decision overload, where after navigating a 10-hour workday of micro decisions, choosing a movie to stream feels physically impossible.
It also appears in the hidden emotional maintenance costs of modern life. The sheer cognitive calories required to process the daily global news cycle, manage a fragmented digital identity, and still show up for your family.
That's just too much.
The friction is happening, but it's happening quietly inside millions of individual nervous systems.
And because everyone is dealing with this isolation, staring at their own screens, it projects an illusion of stability.
Yes, exactly.
Like if you're an economist looking at the macro data, everything is fine. Packages are delivered, GDP is moving, but underneath, the researchers note we are suffering from what they call unignitable fatigue.
You are simply too drained to strike the match. People are surviving, but they are doing so by burning through their resynchronization margins.
Their margins.
Right, those little pockets of slack that used to exist. Staring out the window on a bus ride, waiting in line without a phone, chatting with a neighbor. Those have evaporated.
Yeah, they've been totally filled with fast-paced digital input.
Exactly. We are experiencing high-frequency local wear and tear, quietly.
But because we are so atomized and drained, our perception of reality naturally gets distorted. If society looks fine on the surface but feels completely broken underneath, how do we even make sense of global events?
It's incredibly difficult.
Right. When you log online and see absolute chaos, public outrage, and endless arguments, how do you process that without burning up the last 1% of your battery?
Well, the research introduces an observational framework to solve exactly that problem. It asks us to fundamentally change how we read the world.
Okay, let's get into this framework.
When we see a conflict or a news event, our instinct is to judge it in binary terms, right or wrong, true or false. That binary thinking requires endless debate, which just feeds the exhaustion loop.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. So the framework suggests we use a three-layer observational model instead, the N, I, and OS layers.
N, I, and OS. Let's translate those layers using a technology analogy because that helps me visualize it. Think of reading a global event like looking at an app on your smartphone.
Okay, I like that.
The first layer is the N layer, which stands for narrative. This is the user interface of the app. It's the sleek buttons, the marketing copy, the political slogans, the official press releases. It is what the people involved claim is happening.
Perfect. And beneath that interface is the I layer, or the internal layer. This is the corporate intention behind the app.
Right.
It represents the unspoken values, the hidden fears, historical traumas, and the deep-seated psychological motives of the actors involved. It's the data mining strategy that the user interface is designed to hide.
Finally, you have the OS layer, the operational system. This is the actual code. The server farms, the logistics pipelines, the flow of capital, military supply chains, and algorithmic sorting.
The physical reality of it all.
Exactly. It is the cold, hard physics of how the machine actually moves reality, completely devoid of emotion or narrative.
The utility of this framework is that it stops you from arguing with the user interface.
Oh, that's a great point.
When we see extreme public outrage online, we usually engage with the narrative layer. We argue about the slogans, but the framework teaches us to treat extreme emotion not as noise, but as a gradient. It is a diagnostic sensor.
Emotion as friction heat. Let's ground that. Say a rural community erupts in anger because an automated logistics hub is being built in their town.
Okay, a very common scenario these days.
Right. If you only look at the N layer, the narrative might be framed as stubborn locals resisting economic progress. If you argue at that level, you just drain your energy in a pointless debate.
But if you look through the OS layer, the emotion makes perfect mechanical sense. You are witnessing the slow membrane local infrastructure, human jobs, physical landscapes grinding against the fast OS of capital optimization and algorithmic logistics.
Wow.
The anger is literally the friction heat generated by the velocity mismatch.
And understanding the mechanism actually saves your cognitive calories. By diagnosing the structural shear, you detach from the exhausting daily outrage cycle.
Exactly.
You stop getting angry at the narrative and start seeing the tectonic realities underneath. It gives you permission to step back.
It allows you to process the chaos without internalizing it. When you realize the machine is functioning exactly as it was built to function, you stop blaming yourself for feeling overwhelmed by it.
Okay, let's synthesize everything we've unpacked here. The picture that emerges from this deep dive is a civilization that has quite literally optimized itself out of the ability to rest.
We really have.
We have built an operational system that runs beautifully, but the fundamental friction between that unstoppable machine and the exhaustible human beings tethered to it is, well, it's the defining characteristic of our era.
Recognizing this reality forces a massive shift in how we think about the future.
Yeah.
If we accept that society is functioning in a state of chronic depolarization, that it isn't going to suddenly break, but rather continue grinding,
Yeah.
our priorities have to change. The most critical question is no longer what is going to collapse.
Yeah.
The critical question becomes, where does the capacity to resynchronize still exist?
Where are the structural chargers for that 1% battery?
Exactly.
The sources argue that the chargers are the core elements of the slow membrane. Care work, raising children, looking after the vulnerable, redundancy in our schedules, local community connections, deep, slow dialogue that doesn't have an immediate economic output.
But under the logic of the fast OS, all of those things are classified as inefficiencies.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Sitting on a porch talking to a neighbor doesn't produce data or capital. Therefore, the system views it as wasted time. But the researchers argue the exact opposite.
Which is.
These slow human elements are no longer just quaint lifestyle choices or sentimental ideas. They are literally the new, critical infrastructure required for civilization to survive.
Care is infrastructure. Redundancy is resilience. That completely flips the script.
It really does.
It means that protecting your unstructured time isn't a selfish luxury. It is an act of systemic maintenance. Without those pockets of slow connection, the human element of the system permanently loses its elasticity. It becomes brittle.
And the machine will continue to move at light speed. The fast OS is not going to voluntarily slow down. Therefore, fiercely protecting the slow membrane becomes the most vital work individuals and communities can engage in.
We started this deep dive talking about that eerie paradox. The packages are moving perfectly, but the person opening the box feels like they are falling apart.
Right.
It makes perfect sense now. The package travels through the fast OS, but the human at the door is a slow membrane organism trying to survive in a world that views sleep as a bug in the code.
We are trying to reconcile the irreconcilable.
And because this is a structural reality, there is no neat little bow to wrap this up with. You can't life hack your way out of a velocity mismatch.
No, you definitely can't.
So instead of a definitive conclusion, we want to leave you with the structural questions posed by the researchers. These are the things to mull over on your commute, or the next time you feel that unignitable exhaustion setting in.
There are important questions to ask yourself.
First, what does recovery actually mean now in a world where the infrastructure fundamentally never logs off?
Right.
Second, can a society that is structurally incapable of stopping remain stable over the long term? Or does chronic depolarization eventually mutate into something else?
That's the scary one.
It really is. And third, in your own life, where does your capacity to resynchronize still exist? Where are your margins and how fiercely are you protecting them?
Absolutely.
But beyond those structural questions, here's a final thought to chew on that builds on all of this. If the fast OS truly never slows down, how does the human story end? Will future generations eventually undergo a radical evolutionary shift, perhaps merging with the technology to simply no longer require the slow membrane recovery phase at all? Or is human biology the ultimate, unyielding hard stop, the one immovable wall that will eventually force the machine to break its own rules and slow down?
Biology versus the algorithm. It will be the defining conflict of the next century.
It absolutely will be. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of your slow membrane out there, protect your margins, and we will catch you on the next one.